Hey everyone, Tim here for the patch 17.6 rundown. This is going to be our 3-week patch because of Riot Summer Break. It's also going to be the regionals patch, so let's jump into it. So the patch goals first. Uh, the balance after the 17.5 macro patch was pretty good. Obviously, some Shepherd comps were hit harder than we'd want, especially LeBlanc. But most of the champions and traits are in a pretty good spot, which, should be because we are 5-6 patches into Space Gods. So our focus here is the outlier system, which is augments, right? There's a lot of things that don't make augments in Space Gods feel that good. Some of them is that people aren't getting those high chases that they always had. That's hard to solve in the middle of the set. But there's other things that we can, which is this is not just going to be number reworks. It's going to be actual changes to many augments or mechanics changes and a lot of numbers changes to make sure that those augments aren't going to be as dead or that constricting going into 17.6. But we do have champs and traits, so let's jump into it. 6 Anima is probably the one trait that just doesn't work in Space Gods. I think it needed a huge overhaul to get there, and we couldn't do it in the middle of the set. But for now, we're making it so there's less gold in 6 Anima, because what happens now is that you high roll, you get this Fury, you get 6 Anima, you put it in, you're like struggling, you're low HP, and you want power, and you just get more gold, which doesn't always translate to power because there's RNG. So we've taken out the gold cash outs, which means that you're more likely to get the component and the emblems faster and faster, and the TG, which means that you will get upfront power, which means you can stabilize a little bit faster and then start snowballing that 6 Anima. Arbiter, this is a really small change. I think it's in a good spot. I think the LeBlanc outputs are weaker than they should be, which a lot of it has to do with LeBlanc. But this is the one input where if you reroll last turn, you get something at the combat start. That is just under the bar for the rest of them. So most of them are getting buffed. And then there's one output that is also below the bar, is that if you get a shield on combat start, this thing ends up getting so big that even if we buff it more, it doesn't matter. So we're going to make it last 10 seconds so that if you don't get the full value in 8 seconds, it's less likely to expire. And then Meeple 7, I'm really glad that Gnar and everything has kind of emerged as this new strategy for the Origin. I think this is kind of what we wanted with Veigar and Gnar. But Gnar is a little bit too consistent for being a reroll comp, right? You can hit a lot more consistently, which is good. But you also get this extra econ, which lets you push 9 and get Jhin and all these powerful late game options that people have kind of optimized around Xayah. And Gnar also does it. So lowering the gold here. Nova, I think a lot of the Nova units have found spots in other comps with secondary carries, but they're never like the star, which means that we still have the room to buff these 5 Nova bonuses. Caitlyn, the headshot damage is going to go up. I think we're getting a TF buff later in the patch as well. So this is going to help with that Medallion comp, but also the 5 Nova comp. Akali, again, she's on the Jinx reroll board, but that's not 5 Nova, so this is another avenue you can explore. And Kindred's getting a pretty hefty buff. Again, Kindred's board is always with Master Yi, always with 4 Marauder, and she's always a secondary carry. Shepherd, in the micro patch, we couldn't do the exact change we wanted, which was pulling power out of the AP aura and putting it into the actual summon, which is supposed to be the cool part. So we're doing that now. 5, I think was close. I think the nerf was warranted to hit some of Fast 9, but it left the actual like 5 comp feeling really, really weird because you're playing a bunch of 1 costs that don't do much on your board. This is a small buff. It's going to do a little bit more damage. It's going to get a little bit more HP, especially on stage 5 and stage 6. So this is more like, hey, if I actually had to flex around this with an emblem, then it's easier. But the big buff is going to be Shepherd 7. It's going to get a bigger shield, more damage, and a lot more HP on stage 5. So if you actually get this, it feels like the high roll trade it should be, and it can compete with all those legendary boards. All right, 1 cost. As I mentioned before, TF is one of the only 1 costs right now that you probably should not itemize or think about itemizing on stage 2. He was already at the numbers where he was, the premier 1 cost reroll comp, so we're actually buffing him past that. And Caitlyn's been buffed a couple times. But I think the metas around him has changed. Medallion's been changed. So he should feel like at least a good item holder for Lulu and AP comps, but hopefully there's some 1 cost reroll coming back with him. 2 costs, the second Gnar nerf, both are really small. I really expect him to still be a really great item holder for Xayah and be his own 3-starable like reroll comp, but he's just a little bit too consistent and the floor is too high for him. Mordekaiser, there's no 1 cost change here. But but there's going to be a 2-star buff and a big 3-star buff. 2-star Mordekaiser is okay. He kind of just has a really good turret web, so there's not a lot of room there. But I think I've seen like 1 3-star Mordekaiser this set outside of the championship augment, so there's a lot of room here. Is this going to solely bring back AP 2-cost reroll with like Zoe and things? I don't think so, but I think there's room here, and so we're taking advantage of that. 3-cost Victor, the bane of PBE in the first patch. Hasn't found footing since then, even though he's gotten numerous buffs. He's kind of like already to that point and then a little bit further. So this is kind of just another retro of like, hey, the patch evolves a lot. The first patch environment is not always the 5th and 6th. Very, very small buff here, but bigger on the 3-star. I think the 3-star is like hard to chase and definitely not worth chasing. So hopefully that opens up an AP avenue here. His 80 is definitely kind of emerged as the best way to play the meta in 17.5. 4-cost, going off that, the 4-cost buffs are going to be AP buffs, Karma, and LeBlanc. Karma has always kind of fallen off now, not even as a secondary carry. She's just on the board and never gets items, especially on the Fast 9 boards. On Darkstar boards, we really don't want to itemize her, so this is a decent buff to her total spell damage. This is the number that gets split 3 ways. LeBlanc obviously hurt by the Shepherd changes. This is a buff to auto attack damage, her consistent DPS. There's some Shepherd changes and there's some Arbiter changes. So overall, she's getting a decent package to lift her up from where she was before. And then Morgana has this really weird spell shape where she has to be mana locked for like 3 to 4 seconds. So that HP number can be a lot higher because if she takes a bunch of damage, she doesn't actually start gaining mana again. Buffing that up, buffing that ally heal as well, so that when you itemize her, you get your, team-wide aura being a little bit stronger. And this says champs 1 cost. This is a funny haha meme, but Shen is a 5 cost. He's meant to be a 5 cost. Obviously, we're not happy with how he's landed. I think there's a lot of learnings here on what to do with a traitless 5 cost and how to give them a fantasy. I think Shen struggles with 1, being traitless, so his ceiling can't be that high. 2, having a really good flexible aura, which eats into his own personal power budget. And 2, being a tank model, but also being a melee carry. So he's kind of splitting between both and not doing either that well. So hard to solve without a whole spell rework, but we're making some quality of life changes. His attack speed bonus when he casts a spell is always going to affect himself. So even if he casts on the largest clump and doesn't include himself, he'll still get a bonus. And that bonus is going to be stronger, right? It's not going to decay. I think the number is 80% right now. Rather than decaying over 3 seconds, he's just going to get 80% AS for 3 seconds. Should make him feel a lot more cohesive, a lot smoother, and honestly, like make him less item dependent as well. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Shen, not the best 5 cost. So that moves on to augments. There's a lot. I'm going to read every single one, and I'll probably give more detail on the more interesting changes that we're going to take forward. Obviously, this is coming at 17.6, so pretty late in the set. I wish we could do something like this earlier, but as everyone knows, we did a lot of mechanic work and a lot of champion work for the first couple patches. Didn't leave a lot of room to do augments, but ideally the team sees how this was done, takes a lot of the learnings from this and takes it forward to the future sets so that we have less of these dead augments later. Band of Thieves, just weak, so we're buffing it. That one's pretty simple. Best Friends 1 and 2, kind of an archaic augment where it only gave armor, which made it feel like, hey, if there was an AP lobby or an AP meta, I should never click this because people don't like clicking things where they think they're not getting value. So making it give armor and MR, and obviously we have to nerf it a little bit. Birthday Reunion, the lesson here is when you give a lot of stuff in an augment, it usually gets watered down, especially as a gold augment. Birthday Reunion is actually not watered down. You get a really strong 2-star 2 cost, you get a TG, and you get a 2-star 5 cost at level 9. It was just very strong for its entire life, and kind of like an unconditional click because it was so good. Making it a little bit harder to play, so this is going back on like, hey, I think there's 2 augments here that remain more conditional, Birthday Reunion and Forward Thinking, but that's because this was too good. Right, so we're making it more of a choice. If you want to play that tempo game, you want to level to 5 sooner. We're giving you 3 gold up front, but you won't get that 2-star 2 cost until you go to level 5. So you need to level ahead of tempo. And if you wait until 2.5 to get your 2-star 2 cost, it's not going to be as good, right? You might have already bought some units that don't fit. It's more of just like a standard econ boost at that point. So that's going to be a pretty big nerf to it. I still think it'll be good in its spots, but not just generically click all the time and then win the game. Blood Offering, just like Best Friends, is just it only gave AD and gave you a ton of tank stats, which didn't really solve any like melee champions fantasy. Like, right, melee champions, if you're gonna say, hey, you're gonna be really tanky, I want to build pure damage then, but I built a BT, so I can't build crit. I can't build all this damage. So you're making it a little bit more generic, moving some of that power from the HP into the AD and AP it gives now, so it helps AP and AD carries. Bodyguard Training, just a little weak. Boda Bud, just a little weak as well. This was always one of my favorite augments. And then Contract Killer Pike. This is Pike's champion augment. It is kind of weird that Pike has been more consistent without his championship augment, champion augment, right? Pike Gwen, Pike Meepsy, stuff like that. A lot of the reason is that, hey, this augment is fine when it gets on the backline. He gets a lot of gold. It's pretty fun. It's pretty cool. But the moment he gets stuck on a tank after stage 3, he's just losing the fight instantly. So we're buffing that tank damage up so that, hey, he can actually slowly chew through that tank and get to the backline. Critical Success. This is the Gloves Silver Quest augment, where if you crit a lot, you get more gloves. Ended up being very, very narrow because critting is something that's really, really RNG early game. And one glove that this gave you wasn't enough to actually make you crit a lot. It means that you had to have an Infinity Edge or a Jeweled Gauntlet. And if you have a Jeweled Gauntlet, you need mana. And so you really could only click this with a lot of gloves. And then if you had a lot of gloves, would you really want more gloves later? It was just a very, very complicated mess to get in the best spot. So we're just disabling it. Deadlier Caps. Obviously not as good as Deadlier Blades. Deadlier Blades naturally has a lot of synergy with all the comps like Quirky and other AD comps. And Deathblade is just a better item on stage 2. So kind of shoring that up. Obviously, some of it has to do with meta, but we've seen that this augment has only really been good with Vagar from set 16 because Rabadon's is just not that good on stage 2. In a Prismatic lobby, that kind of kills your game. We're giving it 1 mana regen, so it's a little bit less reliant on having a tier component or a tier item, and then seeing this, it can be a little bit more stable. It also makes that fantasy of 3 Rabadons feel a little bit more fun. You get 3 mana regen, that's like half a blue buff. Early learnings, I like that we tried this on the patch before. It was a little bit too much, but now we get to see the actual power of 1-cost reroll is viable with certain augments, so we're just slowing it back down a little. Expedition, really complicated augment. I think there's a lot of cool solutions we can do to this, but each has their downsides. Right now, this is an augment that a lot of people like, but the higher MMR you go, there's this big gap of like how it's perceived. One of that is that people kind of optimize the augments and play pattern to get Expedition cashed out as early as 3-7 or 4-1. Especially when there's multiple people taking it for the Radiant item. Then you have 2 to 3 people who are not really playing the game until 3-7 or 4-1. And then they spike really hard, and then you're just getting destroyed on stage 4 by Radiant items. That's not fun. But overall, the augment is balanced in the sense that, hey, it kind of scales pretty well. People who don't know this cash it out later, but they're also playing against weaker boards. People who do know it are playing against stronger boards. It's kind of hard to find the right middle ground, but I do think it leads to some unhealthy games. So we're going to do the simple nerf here of like, hey, we're going to nerf the boring part of the augment, which is just more gold. And we're also going to make it mutually exclusive to one player because this is the type of augment where the game is not really TFT when multiple people take this. Again, it is balanced. It's just a very, very weird pattern. Forge and Strength artifacts have been optimized over the set, especially with mech and other comps, nerfing it. Forward Thinking, this is the other augment we're making more conditional, but often people just don't roll on 3-2 and between 3-2 and 4-2 when they're going fast 8 or fast 9, so this didn't have a big drawback. And I think that this augment is meant to have this moment of a lot of gold raining down on you. And so if we made it balanced without any risk, it would just be an econ augment like Epic Roll Down, which is like 40 to 50 gold, which is way less fun. So we're pushing it back to have more risk again. So you're usually going to lose 1 more life, which means that, hey, like this is risky to take, but you're going to get a huge payout for it. Going long, just weak, getting a buff. Golden Gamble, just getting a buff on both. Mordekaiser's Heat Death. This is one of the reasons that Mordekaiser 3's data is also really bad, is that this augment is kind of tied to 6 Darkstar and is not really stable before then. He's getting a small buff here as well. I think one of the big flaws with this that we haven't been able to solve is that this augment is really good at killing everything except your main tank. So when you have like the perfect build, he'll kill everything, and then you're stuck hitting this like 3-item tank for like the whole fight, and it's really, one, not fun to watch, and two, not good at winning fights. But a decent buff on the 3-star. For that, high voltage, just a small buff. This build is like okay. But we've also increased some of the filtering, so it's not going to show up as often for AD boards on 3-2, which should help a lot. Late game specialist, again, kind of archaic that I was banned from level up. When we made level 9 easier to get, you can kind of just get to level 9 with a bunch of gold augments and prismatic augments, so it doesn't really feel fair that level up is excluded. And rather than like ban every single XP augment from late game specialist, we're just saying, hey, it's possible. People can get level 9 without any econ augments. This is just a bonus, but we are nerfing it because of that. Living Forge, just like Forge and Strength, really good, getting a nerf. Loot Singularity is kind of a learning that, hey, we had these extra cash outs as like a pressure valve of, hey, if we need to add more cash outs, we have the system for it. But people data mined it and then saw the cash outs, saw that they were really boring, and said this augment sucks. When the real point was that, hey, people aren't meant to get to these, they won't know in the game. I don't think that was well executed. So we're kind of adjusting this so the perception gets a little bit cleaner about it. We're removing the really late cash outs that nobody was going to get. We made it so that the components are a little bit earlier, because you're playing a gold augment, you kind of want it to be like powerful and good early game. So giving you components faster, and then you're going to get the champions a little bit later. And then we made cash out 16, which used to be 555, to be 777, and it's going to be your high chase, 6 Dark Star and 2-1, win streak the whole game type of reward, kind of like weightlifting in set 16. It's going to give you 3 artifacts. So this is a lot of like learning how to present augments, because this augment was good the entire time before this change, right? It was really, really strong. It gave people a lot of good direction, gave people a fun quest, but there was a lot of misses here on like, hey, the loot we gave was balanced, but not super useful or satisfying. And then there's a lot of confusion on those later cash outs. Lucky Gloves, just weak on 2-1, it gets 4 gold. Pilfer, you get that TG a little faster. Recombobulator has been the worst augment in the game for a while, which was kind of intended. It's always been down there, but it's dropped a little bit more than we would like. We're giving you 3 rerolls, making it a little bit easier to transition to a new board. It's a fun augment. I don't think this will like make it OP or anything, just easier to click. Reinforcements, a little bit more gold. Restart mission has slowly been optimized to kind of predict for it or play for it, which is like, hey, if I don't have a board, this thing is very, very strong. It gives me 30 plus gold. It's meant to have a pretty big cost from just removing your whole board, but if you don't have a board, there's no cost. So we're making it exclusive from that, kind of just hitting that high point. Retribution, a lot of precision in the set. This change made it better. It's still just not good enough to take, so we're buffing it up. And then self-destruct, Gragas' championship augment. We haven't changed this in like a couple patches, and it's just getting better and better in the data as people optimize how to play it. Very, very jarring augment to play against. It blows up your entire board very quickly and then blows it up again on the second cast. So we're just overall lowering the damage down. He's going to blow up your boards a little bit less. Shimmer Scale Essence. After the last Mogul's nerf, it went from like one of the best augments ever to a good augment. That's still over the line, so we're nerfing it again. Time Stream. The lesson here is that when you try to make a trade augment that only buffs 4 units and oftentimes 3 units, you can't really make the number like fair without being absurd, right? We're only buffing 3 units. You're kind of giving like a champion augment to like 3 champions, especially on a permanently scaling one like this. It's really hard to find that number. So we're making it a higher floor by buffing the team-wide effect. We're giving it a team-wide effect where, hey, we're saying we can give some lever to help your team, and then you can focus on buffing your time stream units. Treasure Hunt. This is green. It should be red. It's going to take more gold for each chest, but that is to offset the fact that we've kind of stopped this coin flip on the 5th treasure chest. 5th treasure chest used to be an artifact or used to be a completed item. One of those is definitely more fun and more like higher ceiling than the other. And so it felt really bad to have this coin flip and then lose it. It's just always going to be an artifact. We don't like having moments like that. I don't think that's really fair to the player to have this whole quest and then just flip your game on it. So we're making that. Too tanky. This one is obviously for Samira Orin. We need to be prepared that when we make double trouble augments like this, that it's going to be balanced around 1 to 2 comps. Right now, I think Samira Orin is way over the line with 2 tanky, but I think the individual units are doing really good things for the set, especially in the 3-cost space. Like Orin is in multiple reroll comps. Space Groove is like balanced if you don't do the double trouble thing. So we can't really touch the champions. And the reason we didn't touch the unique mechanic of Space Groove, which is that the more you field, even if it's duplicates, the stronger it gets, is that was kind of intentional for Double Trouble. Obviously, it's too strong for that. But changing that now adjusts the whole landscape of that comp. And there's a chance it's too weak, it's too strong after the rebuff or stuff like that. And doing that level of a change this late into the set is too risky, especially on this patch. And so we're taking the safer option of like, hey, we're going to bounce 2 tanky around Samira Orin and make it more reasonable rather than risk killing a comp or making a comp too insane. Earth Gambit, wise spending, too strong, lowering the gold here. And then that's it for augments. And so as I said, hopefully we can take these learnings forward. And I've actually made sure that this passes on to the future sets teams so that we don't have the case where we have so many conditional augments on top of a conditional set. So I really want to invest in that as a personal thing, that set 18 and set 19 have more broad augments, or if we do have more narrow augments, they're actually like a clear purpose and they're like a lot more exciting and that journey is better. So I'm excited for that. Now we're on to the bug fixes. Only 2 because we're later in the set. Fix the bug where Soraka's Blessing of Prosperity had the wrong tooltip on the God prop. Those were misaligned. Fix that up now. It fixed a really niche bug where the Shepherd Summon would get an extra copy if you had 2 tanky, and this copy was like useless. It was just funny, but we cleaned that up. But that's it. Again, this is coming out pretty early when I'm filming this, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's 1 or 2 more changes because this is a 3-week patch. We want to make sure it's right. But as always, that's it. Thanks for playing. See you guys next time. See ya.